Code Explained says hi. Today we're going to build a to-do list app using JavaScript. You can see that our app here has a basic interface, so a welcome message, hi, and then your name, and then an input. So I'm just going to go and try to add a to-do and then hit enter on my keyboard, and you can see that to-do has been added successfully. You can also go and use this plus button here to add a to-do. You also can see here that each to-do has been assigned a different color, which makes our to-do interesting. And you saw that I can check or uncheck a to-do using this button, or you can just click on the to-do itself to check or uncheck a to-do. Also, I can click on this button here to edit a to-do and then hit enter to save the changes. Now I can go and remove a to-do by clicking on the trash icon here. And when the user tries to add an empty to-do, he gets this message, this notification that says the input is empty. Also, if I add a to-do test and then I try to add the same to-do, we get this notification that says duplicate to-do. And now when the user closes the app, closes the browser, or restarts the computer, he will always find this to-do here saved when he gets back and open the app again. So if I refresh now, you can see that the to-dos are still there because we saved them to the local storage. And when the list is empty, our app shows nothing to do. Well, this is an easy app to build, and I will try my best to explain everything in details. So let's go and code this from scratch. And now it's time to go and grab the starter template from GitHub. You'll find the link down in the description. So the starter template here has a folder called image, which has an image that we will be using as a background for our app, and then the style.css, which is already typed in. All the code is already typed in. Because I'm not gonna cover CSS in this tutorial, I'm just gonna cover HTML and JavaScript. So I'm gonna go back to the repo here and then click on code and then download this as a zip. Once downloaded, I'm gonna open the zip file and then go and grab just the starter template and paste it in the desktop. I'm gonna go and rename this to to-do list, and that's it. And now I just opened my VS Code and the browser side by side, and I'm gonna go and open the folder or the starter template we have grabbed from GitHub. So I'm gonna select the folder. And now you can see here that we have the image and the style.css already typed in. Now it's time to go and create our index.html file. And I'm going to start with the basic HTML code, and then I'm going to type in test here, save, and then go live. Now you can see that it's working. It's time to go and change this title, to-do list in JavaScript, and hit save. Now it's time to go and link our style sheet, the style.css file, and now you can see that the CSS is applied. I'm gonna hide this and then go and create a folder with the class name container. I'm gonna hit save, and then I'm gonna add a header and then another div with the class name header here, and this time it's gonna be an h2 that says hi code explained. I'm gonna hit save, and now you can see the header with the background image and the welcome message. Now it's time to add the form here, an input and the button. So I'm gonna go here and then add a div with a class name new to do, and inside it's gonna be a form with no action, but I'm going to use an ID called to-do form, and the inside is going to be an input with the text as a type and a button with type submit. That's it. Now the text here, or the name for our input, is going to be new to do, and the same thing for the ID, new to do. So the placeholder here, it's going to be I will do and then something. So now you can see that my input here is visible and I can type in anything here. For the button here, we're going to be using a plus icon, and the icons I will be using in this tutorial are the ones by Bootstrap. So I will need to go to Bootstrap, or to icons.getbootstrap.com, and I need to grab the style sheet for the icons. So I'm gonna go and copy this link here. I'm gonna go back to VS Code, and just next to the title I'm gonna paste in the code. Now I'm gonna go and grab the code for the plus icon. So I'm gonna go here, it's this one here, and I'm gonna copy its code, go back to VS Code. I'm gonna paste it in here, and then I will need to open my browser and refresh, and you can see now I have my input here and then the plus icon. Now it's time to go and create the to-dos list here. So I'm gonna go here and add a class name called to-dos list. It's actually an ID, and then I'm gonna add a to-do. So a to-do has a class name, it's a dev with a class name to-do, and it's also gonna have an ID, which is the ID or the index of the to-do in an array, because later on in JavaScript we're gonna save all the to-dos in an array. So for example, the first one's ID is gonna be 0, and now here I need this icons, the circle icon, which I click on to check the to-do. So this is what I'm talking about, this circle here. I'm just gonna copy this, go back to VS Code, paste it in. So if I hit save, now you can see this icon. When I click on this one here, I will need to hide this line of code using JavaScript, and then I will need to go and grab this one and show it to the user instead of the other one. So if I hit save now, you can see that it's now checked. Now for the text of our to-do, for example, go get milk. You can see here the text is just a paragraph. Now to make it checked, I will just add a class name here, a class name called checked. Alright, now when it's not checked, I'm just gonna remove the class name and then remove this icon and show this one instead. Now we need these two icons here, the edit icon and the trash icon. So I'm gonna go and grab the icon from Bootstrap. So it's this pencil square icon. Go back to VS Code, paste it in. If I hit save, you can see now the icon is there. Now let's go and bring the trash icon. So I'm gonna copy this code here and then go to VS Code and paste it in there. Now let's open our browser, hit save, and everything now is good. Now instead of hard coding this to-dos, of course we need to use JavaScript, and also we need to make every button here works. Like when I click on this one I want to remove this to-do, or when I click on this one I want to check or uncheck the to-do, etc. We also need to manage the notifications here based on the errors that happens there in using our app from a user. So the next time is implementing JavaScript. Let's do that. And now if I go and type in something in the form and then hit enter in the keyboard, the form will submit and this will refresh the page. And that's something we don't want to happen, so we need to prevent that from happening. So to fix that, we need to go and of course link a script, a file we didn't create yet, a script.js file. So I'm gonna hit save here, and then I'm gonna go and create that file called script.js. Now inside the script here, what I need to do first is to select the form here. So I'm gonna go back to my index.html, go to the top. The form here has an ID called to do form. I'm just gonna copy it and then go and add a comment called select elements, and then I'm gonna call the element form and then document that get element by ID. Now I'm gonna go here and listen to the form or when the form submits. So I need to say form submit for submit. And I'm gonna go now and say form, then add an event listener. So the event listener type will be submit, and this will fire a function or an anonymous function, and this function will take in the event argument here. So I'm gonna go now and say event dot prevent default, and this will prevent our form from refreshing our page. So if I hit save, type something in here, hit save or hit enter, nothing's happening. Alright, if I go and console log something here, like say submit, hit save, go back here, open the console, and then type in something, hit enter or hit the button, you can see that our form still submits but not refreshing the page. And now we need to go here, and next step in our tutorial will be saving the to-do. So let's go and do that. Well, to save it to do, I'm gonna create a function called save to do to handle that, and I'm gonna go here and define the function save to do function. So function, then save to do. It will take no parameters. To save the to-dos, I'll be using an array. So I'm just gonna define that here at the top. So I'm gonna use let and then to-dos, and it's gonna be an empty array. Now when I hit enter, I will prevent default and then save the to-do. So the first thing in my function here, save to do, is to go and get the input value here. So I still need to select this input first. So I'm going to go to my index.html. This is my input here, and it has an ID. So I'm going to use this ID to select my input. I'm just going to go and duplicate this line here. I'm going to call this to do input, and I'm going to paste in the ID here. Now inside my save to do, I'm just going to go and create a constant because this is not going to change. I'm going to call this to do value, and then I'm going to set to my to do input dot value. And then I'm going to go and create a const to do. So my to do here, each to do I will save in my array, it's going to be an object. Because I'm not just gonna save the value of the to-do, I also gonna go and save its value and whether it's checked or not, and also its color, because each to-do will have a different color. Now for the value, of course, it's gonna be my to-do value, and for the checked, it's gonna be by default false. So the to-do is not checked by default. So when I add the to-do for the first time, checked is not is going to be false. For the color here, I will need to use this hash sign and then to randomly generate a code for a color. For that, I'm going to use Google to search for how to generate random color using JavaScript, and this is the code that I have found. I'm just gonna go and copy it, go back here and paste it in, and that's it. So this will generate a random color each time I add a to-do. Now all I need to do is push my to-do into my array. So I'm just going to use todos.push and push my to-do. Now let's go and console log my to-dos array to see what happens whenever I add a to-do. Now let's go back here, open my console, and then use a test one, and then hit this button here. Now if I take a look at my array, I have my to-do here. The first one here is false, the color is a random color, and then the value of the to-do. Now I'm gonna go and add another one, test2, hit enter. You can see now that my array has two to-dos. The first one here is test1, the second one is test2, two different colors, and both checked is set to false. So that's great. Now if I go and empty this input here and hit enter, now I have three elements here, three to-dos, but the last one here value is set to empty, which is not good for our app. So I will go and check whether check if the to-do is empty. So I'm just going to use a const here. I'm going to say is empty, and then I'm going to say to my to-do value. If it's equal to an empty string, then it's empty. If it's not, then it's not. So I'm going to use an if statement here, if is empty. So if it's empty, I'm going to just alert for now. To-do's input, input is empty. Let's save. Now I'm going to use an else and this. So if it's not empty, I'm just going to go and save the to-do to my array. Now let's go back and check that. If I click on this one here, the to-do here, input is empty. So we got this alert. Later on, we're going to use our custom notifications. So now I will also check if, for example, if I have here test one, I'm just going to go and then click back. So we have now in my array, I already have this to do, which is test one. If I click back on this button here, I still add the same to do to my array twice. So I will now need to go and check for duplicate to-dos. So for that, I'm going to use another const called is duplicate. So for this, I'm going to use an array method called sum. So this will take a callback function. So I'm going to go and check if some of the to-dos in my array, some of the to-dos value of my to-dos have the same value as the one the user is trying to add. So it's that simple. So if this evaluates to true, then to-do exists, then it's a duplicate. If this evaluates to false, then it's not a duplicate. And now let's go here and say an elseif here, and then here it's going to be else. So an elseif now if it's duplicate. So I'm going to go and use alert again. So alert, and then to do is duplicate, already exists. I'm going to say already exists. And that's it. So it's saved. Now let's go back and check if that works. Now if I add this one here, back now to do already exists, which is great. Now I'm gonna go and try test with a capitalized T. If I hit save now, you can find, or you can see that we have added the same to do. The only difference is that this one here has a T capitalized. So to prevent that, I'm gonna actually, when I look for the to do, if it's duplicate or not, I'm gonna use here to uppercase. So I'm gonna uppercase the value, that's the value of the to-dos in my array, and compare them to the one the user is trying to add. So this way here, I will not just like go and compare the value of the to-do, but the uppercased version of the value of the to-do. So I'm gonna go here now and check if that works. So this one here is added. This one is not is not permitted to be added. Test here also is not okay to be added to our array. So it says to do already exist, which is great. And now you can see that when I, for example, try test2 and then hit save, it's going to be added to my array, but the test2 is still there, still in my input. So which means I need to clear the input whenever I add a new to-do to my array. So I'm just going to go here. When I push that to-do to my array, I'm just going to go and say to-do input dot value. I'm just going to set this to an empty string. So if I go and hit enter, now you can see that my input has been cleared. So that's great. Now I'm just gonna go and copy this one here, this whole object. I'm gonna remove the to-do object here, and I'm gonna put it directly in here. So I don't want to repeat myself here, and I'm just gonna go and remove this console log code here, and that's it for our save to do. Let's move on to the next step. And now after we have saved the to-dos to our array to-dos, it's time to go and render the to-dos to the user interface. So whenever the user save a to-do, we need to render it to the user interface. So I'm gonna call the function render to-dos, and then I'm gonna go and define that function just at the bottom here. So a comment says render to-dos, and then a function, and then render to-dos. It will take in no parameters. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to change this inner HTML. So I'm going to go through my array to-dos and render each to-do to the user interface. So I will need to go and grab this ID here. This is our to-dos list element here. This is where we need to render our to-dos. So I'm just going to copy this ID here. I'm going to select it using JavaScript, using the same method, getElementById. I'm going to paste in the ID and then call this to-dos list element. So now all I need to do is I'm going to go inside of here, and I need to loop over my array to-dos using the forEach method. So this takes in a callback function. So this callback here takes in the first parameter as the element in our array to-dos, and then the second one is going to be the index of this to-do. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So each time I will go and add that to-do to our to-dos list element that inner HTML. So I'm going to use a plus equal sign because I want to keep the old one I have added. So for example, if I added the first to-do to the inner HTML and then added to the second one, if I don't use a plus equal sign, this will actually override the inner HTML of the to-dos list element. So I'm going to go and use here some backticks, not single quotes, and I'm going to go and grab the template for our to-do. So this is the template for a to-do. I'm just going to go and grab that. I'm going to actually go and uncomment this, copy the whole thing, and then I'm gonna uncomment this one here. I comment that block of code. I'm gonna hit save now. You can see that to do is not there anymore because we are now using JavaScript to render them. So I'm just gonna rearrange this. Let's get some more space here. So the ID here is gonna be just the index of our to do, and then for the text is gonna be our to do dot value. All right. For here, for these two buttons here, it could be if the to do is checked, we're going to be using this class name here. If it's not, going to be using this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and use a ternary operator. So I'm going to say if to do dot checked, I'm going to go and use this one here. This is the icon for a checked to do, and if it's not, I'm going to use this one here. All right, I'm going to get rid of this one. Let's go and rearrange our code. Now it's time to go and actually use the color. So I'm going to use style, the style property, and then color, and then it's going to be our to do dot color, and that's it. So I'm going to hit save now, and let's go to our app and test that. So I'm going to say to do 1. You can see that our to do has been added. This is now the icon has a color, a green color. If I go and say to do 2, now I have the to do 2 also with a different color for our icon here. You can see now that it's just a circle because all the to dos are not checked by default. Now you can see that we have a problem here, that the to do one is rendered 2 times, and that's because we have 2 renders here. So to do 1 here is coming from the first render. To do 1 and to do 2 are coming from the second render. For example, if I say to do 3, now I have the first render here, the second render, and then the third render. So what I need to do is, before doing any render or re-render, I need to actually go and clear the inner HTML of my to-dos list element. So I'm going to do that outside the forEach method. So I'm going to go and add a comment, clear element before a re-render. So before every re-render, I will need to go and clear the inner HTML. So I'm just going to set it to an empty string here, and this is where I actually render to-dos. So hit save now. If I go and say to do 1, to do 2, to do 3, you can see that we don't have that problem anymore. So that's it for our render to-dos. Let's go to the next step. And now you can see that when I click on these buttons here, nothing is happening. That's what we need to fix right now. So if you're thinking that we're going to add an event listener to each of these buttons here, you're wrong. We're not going to do it that way because that's going to be lots of work and lots of event listeners. Instead, we're going to add a single event listener, and that's going to be added to the to-dos list element. So our to-dos list element here contains all the to-dos inside. So that's where we need to add the event listener. So I'm going to go and create a comment here, click event listener for all the to-dos. So I'm going to say to-dos list element dot add event listener, and it's going to be a click event, and this will fire a anonymous function. So this will receive event, the click event, as argument, and now I'm going to use a property called target. So I'm going to say event dot target. I'm going to console log that, console log target, and let's see what we're going to get. So if I open the console here, let's go and add our to-dos again. To-dos 1, to-do 2. If I go and click here, it says that I have clicked on the element to-dos list. If I click on this one here, it says that I have clicked on a p tag again. So it shows me where I have clicked exactly. So that's why I use target here, because I want to know where I have exactly clicked. All right, now I'm gonna go, and because I don't want to know where I exactly clicked, but I actually want to know which to-do that I have exactly clicked on. So I'm gonna go and say parent element here, it's equal to target dot parent node. Let's go and console log that parent element, hit save, go here, open the console log, clear. I'm gonna add some to-dos here, to-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. Now if I click in here, it says that it says container, because I have clicked on to-dos list element and its parent element is the container. If I click now on to-do here, to-do 3, so I clicked on the p tag, but its parent now is the to-do here there. So now when I click on one of these buttons here, it will always show the same element, which is their parent element, which is our to-do with the ID 2 here. Same thing for these ones here, and same thing for all these buttons here. So I now know exactly where I have clicked, which to-do that I have clicked on. So each to-do is defined by its ID here. Well, now if I click, for example here, it shows to-do list. If I click here, it shows container. So I actually need to use an if statement here. Why? Because I want to know if the parent element that I have clicked on is actually a to-do. So here I will check for the class name here. So if the class is a container, well, it's not to-do. If a class, for example, doesn't exist, well, it's not to-do. So I want to do the rest of the code here, what comes after this if statement, only if the class name is a to-do. So I'm gonna go here and say class name, it's a property, it's to-do. So if this is true, or if this is not true, return. So I will only do this here, the rest of this code will run only if this is true, only if the user has clicked on an element that its parent is a to-do. So I'm gonna hit save now. Let's go back here. Let's add a to-do here, to-do. Now if I click here, you can see that nothing's happening, but if I click on this one here, it shows to-do, because the class name here is equal to a to-do. Now if I click here, the same thing. If I click inside of here, nothing's happening. If I click anywhere else, nothing's happening. So that's great. Now I know exactly where I have clicked, which to-do that I have clicked on. And now I can actually name my parent element here. I can actually now rename it a to-do. So then I can actually now access the to-do ID using to-do.id. Now let's go and show that to-do ID. Now let's go and open our console. To-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. So this one has an ID of 0. If I click on it, now you can say 0. You can see 0, 1, and then 3. So whenever I click on one of these buttons here, it will show always the same ID, because it's same to do here. Now you can see that we have here 0, 1, 2. These IDs are actually a string, so we need to convert them to a number using the number object. So let's go and do that one more time. To do 1, to do 2. If I click now on this one, it shows 0, an ID, as a number, 1. If I click here, nothing's happening. So now after I know the ID of the to-do and its ID now is a number, I can actually compare this to the index of the to-do inside my array to-dos where I have saved all to-dos, and I can actually do whatever I want with that to-do inside the array. So let's move on to the next step now. And now that I know the to-do that I have clicked on, I know its ID, so I know the to-do that I have clicked on. Now I will simply need to know which button that I have clicked on for to-do. So for example, did I click on a check button or an edit button or a delete button? So simply what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my function here, render to-dos, and in my HTML here, I'm going to use HTML5 custom attributes. So if you want to add some data to your HTML code, you don't need to do any hack, you just need to use custom or HTML5 custom attributes. And if you want to do that, you just need to say data and then a dash and then your attribute name, whatever you want, attribute name, but it must start with data all the time, and then say equal and then a value of your chars. So for our attribute here name, it's going to be action, because the user is going to take an action here, whether it's check, edit or delete. So I'm just going to go here and say data then action, so it's going to be the name action, and then for the value it's going to be check. So when the user clicks on this icon here, he needs to check the to-do, so the action is check. I'm going to copy this here and I'm going to go to the P or the text here for the to-do, and the action is going to be the same. So when the user clicks on the to-do, it's going to do the same thing, which is check the to-do. For here, for this icon here, which is this one here, it's going to be edit for the action, and then the same thing here, it's going to be delete for the action. Now I'm just going to go and hit save. And now I'm going to go and access this attribute here. To access the attribute is simple. You just need to select the element and then use a property called data set. So I'm going to go and do that here. So here I just got the to-do ID, and here I'm just going to go and say target action. So when I go and add a to-do here, to-do 1 for example, and I click on this button here now is selected using target, if you remember. So that's where I have clicked, so I don't need to go and select the element, I just need to use target. So I'm going to go and say const and then action. So I'm going to get the action from that element that I have clicked on. So I'm going to say target, which is event.target here, .dataset. So this is how you're gonna access these actions or these attributes here, this custom attributes we have added. So dataset and then the name of your attribute. So if it was, for example, something, then you need to say something here. So our attribute name is action, so we're gonna use action here to get that name. So now let's go now and console log the action. So I'm going to console the to-do ID and the action as well. So I'm going to hit save. Let's go and add to-do 1, then to-do 2. Let's go and open our console. Now if I click on here, it's going to say 0, so I have clicked on the to-do with index 0 and the action is check. If I click on here, it's going to be the same thing. Then here it's going to edit, and then this is for deleting the to-do. If I click on this one here, for example, edit, so I now need to go and edit the to-do with index 1 in the array to-dos, and so on. So you get the idea. Now that I know the action here, I simply need to take the action. So I'm going to go and say action if the action here is equal to to check, I'm just going to go and call a check to do function that I didn't create yet, and I'm going to pass in the to do ID. So this function needs to know the ID of the to do, he needs to check. I'm going to go and simply duplicate that line. I'm going to say here if the action is edit, I'm just going to go and call a function edit. The same thing here, if it's delete, I'm just going to go and call a function called delete to do, and that's it. So here, so what this code here does is that when this is true, then the AND operator will run this code here, will execute this part of the code. For the AND operator, if this statement here evaluates to false, then it won't run this code at all. So I hope you get that. Now I need to comment out these two lines of code, and let's go to the next step and create our function check to do. Let's go now and create our function check to do. I'm going to first get rid of this line of code. So add a comment check a to do. So it's a function check to do. It will take in one single parameter to do ID. So I can do this in two different ways. I can use splice, which is an array method, and I can also use map. So splice is faster than map, and splice is one single line of code and will be done. But I'm still gonna prefer to use map because map is going to be more readable than splice. Well, if you're not familiar with map, I'm gonna talk about it here. So let's say you have an array of numbers 1, 2, and then 3, and you use the map method on the array of numbers here. So map here needs a callback function as argument. So a callback function, and what it does simply is it will go through these elements here and run the callback function on each element. So it will run the callback function on 1, then on 2, then on 3, and at the end it will return an array, a new array. So the map here doesn't act on my array here, so it doesn't change the array here, but it will return a new array. So I will go and assign the new returned array from the map method to, let's say, new array. And now if I take a look on my new array here, it will be the same length as the old array. So it will have the first element, then the second, and then the third element here. Now the callback function here must have a return statement at the end, which will define the element that goes into my new array. Let's see an example. So if I have this callback function, the callback function here takes in a parameter. The first parameter is going to be this element here. So I'm going to call this element, or because it's a number, I'm just going to call this number. So this number here will be this element here, which is 1 on the first iteration, then on the second will be the 2, then on the third will be 3. So it needs here some code if you want to, and then at the end you need always a return statement. So for example, I'm going to say number times 2. So in this case here, map will go and run this callback function on 1. So number is 1, so it will return 1 times 2, which is 2. So my new array returned by map will be populated with 2 as the first element. And then for the second element, it's going to be 2 times 2, then it's going to be 4. Then for the third, it's going to be 6. And that's it. So that's how map works. So we're going to be doing the same thing for our to-dos array here. So after running map on my to-dos, it will return a new array. So let's say new array equals. And then it needs here a callback function. So this callback function here will take in as a parameter the to-do itself. Our to-do here is an object with 3 properties: the value, the color, and the checked property. So when we check a to-do, we only need to change that checked property. And the next parameter is the index of the to-do, which is actually the to-do ID of each to-do in our to-dos in our array, or the to-dos we render to the user interface. So now what I need to do is I need to look for the to-do in question, the to-do that the user wants to check. So I'm going to use an if statement. I'm going to check if the index of my to-do inside my to-dos array is the same as the one the user wants to check, which means to-do ID. If it's the same, I want to return. So our map always needs to return an element for the new array. So this element here will need to be an object because I need to return a to-do. This to-do here has 3 parameters: the value, the color, and then the checked property. So for the value, it's going to be to-do.value, so we're not going to change that property. Also, the color will be to-do.color, so we don't want to change that property. But for the checked, it's going to be the opposite, so it's going to be the to-do.checked. So if it was true, then I want it to be false. So not true is false. If it was false, then it will be true. Not false is true. Great. Now for all my other to-dos in my array that doesn't fulfill this condition, I just want to use an else here, an else statement, and return the to-do with the old checked property. So now after I have changed that to-do, I will now go and assign my new array here to my to-dos array, because I want to keep all the changes into my the only one array in my app that's called to-dos. So whenever some change happens, I want that change to be made into my to-dos array. And because map doesn't change the to-dos array, I will just go and save the changes to a new array and then assign the new array to my to-dos array. So I'm not going to do this into lines of code. I'm just going to put to-dos here, say to-dos, and I'm going to get rid of the new array. So now the new array returned by map will be assigned my to-dos, and my to-dos will be now updated. And now I'm going to go and change this code a little bit because I am looking like I'm repeating myself here. 2 returns with the same thing, with the same code, meaning that I am repeating myself here. So first I'm going to go and take this if statement from outside to the inside here of this object here, because this if statement is done just to change this to-do.checked, and you can see here that these 2 lines of code are the same, and what's changed is only this checked property. So why not taking this if statement inside here? So I'm gonna go and use a ternary operator. So I'm gonna say if the index is equal to the to-do ID, I want to return not checked. So if it was true, then it's going to be false. If it was false, then it's going to be true. And then if it's not, I will just go and return the to-do not checked with no changes. So now I can get rid of my if else statement because now I took it inside of my object here. And now because I'm not doing any changes here for both value and color, so why not just copy the old properties from the to-do here. To copy them, I'm just going to use the spread operator, so to do here. So now using the spread operator, this will copy the old properties from my to-do, like the value, the checked, and the color, from here to this new object that I'm gonna return. Well, because I defined the checked property here again, this will override the old checked property inside my to-do object here. Alright, now I'm gonna hit save. And now because my callback function here does have only a return statement with no code here, this means that I can get rid of this return statement. So I can go and remove these return and remove the curly braces. But here, because I have an object now and the object starts with curly braces, now the curly braces now are taken like they are for our function, not for the object, which makes this code has no meaning. So to fix that, to tell it that this is not a function but this is actually an object, I'm going to use the parentheses here. So I'm going to put the whole object inside two parentheses, and this will tell that this is an object, not a function. So I'm going to hit save now. And now because I updated my to-dos array, so I need also to update the user interface, which means I need to do a re-render. So I'm just going to go and call my function render to-dos again, and then hit save. Now if I go here and add a to-do, a first to-do, then a second one, and then if I click on this, now you can see that my to-do has been checked successfully. If I click also on the text, this will check the to-do and uncheck the to-do. So that's great. Now let's move on to edit a to-do. And now let's go and edit our to-do. So I'm gonna go here and uncomment this first. Let's go and create our function edit a to-do. So a function edit to-do. It's gonna take in the to-do ID. So when I click on this button here, I want to take the value of that to-do into my input here. I already have selected my input at the top here, so it's called to-do input. So I'm gonna go and change the to-do input value, and I'm gonna set it equal to this value here. For example, if I click on this button, so and this value here is given by to-dos, the array, because my array has all these to-dos, so I can access the value of that using the index of this to-do, which is actually the to-do ID here. So I'm just gonna put that in here. So this is now a to-do. This is an element. This will return the element. It's an object that has a property called value. Hit save. Let's go back here. To-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. Now if I click on here, you could say now it says to-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. And I can actually go and change this, for example, to do 4. Now if I hit save, you can see we have added a to-do 4 instead of editing the to-do number 3 here. So why is that happening? Because when I edit to-do, when I call the function edit to-do, this will change the input, and when I hit on save, this will call the function here save to-do, and this will actually go and push the to-do into my array to-dos. So I actually need to come here and use an if statement. I'm gonna, for example, check if I am editing a to-do. I will need to update my to-dos array, update to-dos array, or update just the to-do in question, the to-do, the edit to-do. And else, if I'm not editing a to-do, if I'm just like just come and open my app and then type in something, it's save. In that case, I just want to create a new to-do, so I'm just gonna use my old code here. Alright, so now how do I know that I'm editing a to-do? It's simple. I'm just gonna go into my edit to-do. So I'm just gonna go and create a variable called edit to-do ID, and I'm gonna set equal to the to-do ID. So edit the one I am editing, the to-do I am editing ID is the to-do ID here that I have received from my function edit to-do as an argument. Now this edit to-do here must be a global variable, so I'm going to go at the top here and say let edit to-do, and I'm going to set to equal -1 by default. So I'm going to initialize edit to-do ID with -1 when the app runs for the first time, because here when I edit a to-do and call the function edit to-do, this to-do ID will be an index, and indexes in an array starts from 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it will never be equal to -1. So that's why I'm using -1 here. So whenever edit to-do ID is equal to -1, this means that we're not editing a to-do. But otherwise, if it's not equal to -1, for example, if it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., then we know for sure that we are editing a to-do. So based on that, I'm going to go into my save to-do. This is my function save to-do. I'm going to go here. So how do I know if I'm editing a to-do? I'm just going to go and say if edit to-do ID is greater than or equal to 0. So in that case, edit to-do ID is not equal anymore to -1, but it's now equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, so a valid index. So in that case, I actually need to update the to-do in the array to-dos. So if it's equal to -1, then that means that it's a new to-do. So we're just going to go and push it to my array to-dos. So now let's go into my to-dos array, to-dos array, and then use a map method. So this will take a callback to do, then the index. So I'm just gonna go here and look for the to-do in my to-dos that has the same index as the edit to-do ID, and edit it with the new value in my input. So I'm gonna go here and say return. I'm gonna return an object, so it's a to-do. I'm gonna go and spread the to-do object again, and then I'm gonna go and change the value. So I'm gonna override the value property here. So I'm just gonna go like we did before. I'm just gonna check if the index here of this to-do in my array is the same as the edit to-do here, the edit to-do ID. If that's the case, I'm gonna go and change its value in the array to the new value the user has typed in the input. So if it's not, if it's just the other to-dos, not the one the user is editing, I'm just gonna set that to the old value to do that value. So we're not changing the value. I'm gonna hit save now. I'm just gonna get rid of the return and then the curly braces, and I'm gonna use some parentheses here like we did before. I'm gonna hit save. And now this map here will turn a new array, and that new array will be our new to-dos array. So we update our to-dos. And now after we have updated the to-do, after we have edited the to-do, it's time to go and set back edit to-do to -1. So this way I'm going to make sure that next time the user wants to type in the input, he won't go and update a to-do in the to-dos, but actually add a new to-do. So I'm gonna hit save and let's check that. So I'm gonna go here. So to-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. So when I hit save now, to-do edit to-do ID is still equal to -1. So if I hit save now, if this will be false, so we will push that to our to-dos array and we can see it here. But if I click now on this button here, edit, now we have the to-do 2 here, and then the edit to-do ID now is equal to 1, the ID of this to-do here, or the index of this to-do here. So now if I go and change this, for example, to 55, now in this case when I hit save, this function will run, and when I get to this if statement, this now will be true. So I'm gonna go to my and update the to-do in question in my to-do array, and that's how I update my to-do. So if I hit save now, you can see to-do 55, and that's it. And now it's time to go and talk about deleting a to-do. Now let's go and create our function edit or delete a to-do. So I'm just going to go and uncomment this and then create our function delete to-do. So function then delete to-do. It's going to take in the to-do ID again as a parameter. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the filter method. So I'm going to filter my array. So it takes in a callback again. So it's going to be my to-do and then its index. So I'm going to go here and filter all the to-dos that their index here is not equal to the to-do ID that I'm editing. And because filter here is like map, will return a new array. So I'm just going to go and assign this to to-dos to update our to-dos array. And then because I have changed my to-dos array, I'm just going to go and re-render my to-dos. So this is just a re-render. So that's it. So here filter will filter all the to-dos. So we'll return all the to-dos except the one that's its index equal to my to-do ID. All right, so I'm gonna hit save. Let's go here. So to-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. If I click on this icon here, this will delete my to-do, etc. Now I'm going to show you something here. So if I say to-do 1, to-do 2, and then to-do 3. Now if I click, for example, on this one here, edit the to-do, let's say 44, right? And now the user, while editing the to-do 2, decides to remove that to-do. So if I delete the to-do here and click on save, you can see that my to-do 33 has, my to-do number 3 has been edited. So why this is happening? Because when I click on edit here, this will assign the ID of this one here to edit to-do ID here. And when I remove this here, now the next to-do will come in the place of this one here that I have removed. And then when I hit save, then I will update that next to-do that comes after this to-do here. So to fix that, I simply need to go and set edit to-do to -1. So when I remove a to-do, I will make sure that if I'm editing that to-do, I'll make sure that I'm gonna cancel that by setting this to -1. So now if I hit save, let's go and try it again. To-do 1, to-do 2, to-do 3. Now let's go and edit to-do 2. Let's say again to-do 44, and then remove to-do 2. Now if I click on this, you can see that we now add a new to-do called 44, which is great. Now it's time to go and handle our notifications. And now it's time to go and handle our notifications. So I'm going to go to my index.html, and inside my container here, I'm going to add another div with the class name notification. So notification here. So it's going to have an empty inner HTML. So I'm going to, of course, add that using JavaScript. So for example, let's say now for now something here, something. And then I'm going to open my console. Let's go to my inspector and then go to the container, then for notification. You can see something there. Now to make the notification appear, I'm going to add a class name that I have already set in my CSS, in my style.css file. So it's here, notif enter. and notification here. So I already have done the CSS part. So I'm gonna go here to my console. If I add this class name notif enter and it's saved, you can see that my notification has appeared now. If I remove it, again, so this will make our notification disappear. So we're just going to do that but using JavaScript. So we're going to remove our inner HTML here, go to the script, and I'm going to go and create a function show a notification. So I'm going to call the function show notification, and I'm going to use here, or I'm going to pass in a message as a parameter, notification. Now all I need to do is to go and select my notification dev. So I'm just going to go here to top and say const notification element. I'm going to set equal to document, and this time because it's a class name I'm going to use query selector, and I'm going to pass in .notification class name. Now let's go back here, and then the first thing we need to do is to go and change the inner HTML of our notification equals message, just like that. And then we need to add the class name here, notif enter. So I'm gonna say notif element that class list, and then that add a class name. The name of the class name, as you have seen, notif enter. All right. Now I need my notification to disappear after some time. So I'm gonna use setTimeout, and inside we have a callback function, and then I will choose, for example, 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. So I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to go to use class list, then remove this time. So here I'm adding the class name notif enter, and here I'm going to remove the class notif enter after 2000 milliseconds. So basically here, change the inner HTML, or change the message of the notification. Notification enter, here notification leave code. So this is how we can make our notification leave. So let's hit save and go here where I use the alert messages. So instead of alert, I'm just gonna go and say show notification. Same thing here, show notification, and it's saved. Now let's go back here and see. If I click here, you can see to-do's input is empty. If I add to-do 1 and then try to add the same to-do already exists, and that's great. Now let's move on to the next step. Well, I just added a to-do to my list. Now if I refresh, it's gone, which is bad. So we need to save the to-dos to our local storage. Well, what do we need to save to the local storage? Simply, it's going to be our to-dos array. So, and also whenever we update the to-dos array, we need to update our local storage. So for example here, when I hit save, I save the to-do, render to-dos, and then I need to go and update my local storage. So to add an item to the local storage, you need to use setItem, and then this method here takes in 2 arguments, a key, a string, and the value also is a string. So the key here is something you want to use back when you want to get the item back from the local storage. So I'm going to use to-dos here. The value is going to be our array to-dos, but here it says it must be a string, and to-dos is a JavaScript array which has objects. So I need to convert this to a string, and for that I'm going to use json.stringify. So this will convert our to-dos to a string. Now, whenever I render to-dos, this means whenever I update our to-dos array, I will need to go and update my local storage using this same line of code. So I'm just going to copy it and go and look for whenever I update or whenever I render my to-dos. So I don't render the to-dos here, so I'm not going to add that. The same thing here. In my add event listener here, I don't actually render any to-dos here. Check to-do, so I update my to-dos, render to-dos, and then I need to update my local storage. That's great. Now let's go for edit to-do. We don't render to-dos. Here we render to-dos, which means I need to update the local storage. Here we don't render to-dos, so we are done. Now let's hit save now, and now let's go to the top here and add a to-do. So to-do 1, hit save. Now if I refresh, it's gone. But if I go and take a look into my storage, where is storage? Here, local storage, and you can see that my to-do 1 is still there, checked false, and it's color. So which means that my my to-do is saved. So I have saved my to-dos array to the local storage. Now when I refresh, I just need to get it back from the local storage. So here I'm gonna do that when I actually define my to-dos array here. So I'm gonna use here an OR operator, and I'm gonna talk about it in a moment. So I'm gonna say local storage dot get item this time. So we have used here set time, now get item, and you guessed it, we need to use the key to get that item back. So I'm going to use to-dos, the same thing we have here. But if you remember, the value we have saved is a string. Now we need to parse that string and convert it back to a JavaScript array. So I'm going to use the same method here. I'm going to use JSON.parse this time to pass back that string into to an array. That's great. Now, why I'm using OR here? Because let's say this is the first time the user is running the app, nothing's in the local storage. So this line of code here will evaluate to undefined because we have nothing in the local storage. Undefined is false, and then the OR will go and set this to do, set an empty array to this variable here. So if this is true, if we have some to-dos in my local storage, then this will be assigned to to-dos without going to this part of the code here. So that's how OR works. So if this is true, I'm not going to run this code here. If this is false, then I'm going to run this code here. I'm going to hit save now. And if I refresh, you still can't see nothing because we need to render the to-dos. So I will come here and say this is a first render ever. So if the user is running our app for the first time or just opened our app, we need to do a first render. So I'm just going to go and call render to-dos, and that's it. So I'm going to hit save, and now you can see our to-do there. So if I go and say to-do to refresh, you can see my to-dos are there. If I remove these, I have no to-dos here. I just want to show a message here that says nothing to do. So I'm just going to go into my render to-dos function. So it's here, render to-dos. So I'm just going to go here and say f my to-dos array that length is equal to 0. I'm just gonna go and say to-dos inner HTML is equal to center, the tag center, and I'm gonna say nothing to do, and then I'm gonna say return because I don't want to run this code anymore. I'm gonna hit save. Let's go here, and you can see it says nothing to do. But if I have a to do here, it's gone. To do to. If I go and remove this, and now there's nothing to do again that reappears. Well, I just thought that I have finished the app, but I didn't yet. So if I go, for example, and add a to-do here, if I check the to-do, you can see that it's not checked. We don't see the line through here. So what I need to do is I'm just gonna go here in my render to-dos function, and then for the p tag here, we have here a class. So I'm gonna use a ternary operator. So I'm just gonna go and grab this code here, paste it in here. So in this case, if it's checked, I'm gonna use a checked class name. If it's not, I'm just gonna use nothing, no class name. I'm gonna hit save now, and you can see now that we can see the line through there. So if I uncheck this, it's gone. If I check it, it's now there. Well, that's it for our tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Well, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. That's how you're going to encourage me to do more of these videos. Well, take care. See you in another tutorial.